Hi guys! So tonight is our first video on the different systems of the body, and we're going to start off with the circulatory system. So by the end of this video, you should be able to explain the purpose of the circulatory system, identify the main structures of the circulatory system, and explain the function of each of those structures. So please take notes as we go through the video on these three items. Before we get started, I'd like you to think about why it's important to circulate blood through our bodies. So when I say circulate, it's about blood. So take a minute and think about that. Come up with an answer in your head. The circulatory system pumps blood through our entire bodies so that all of our tissues receive the oxygen that they need to do cellular respiration and make ATP. Remember, ATP is the energy that cells use to carry out all of their functions. So the circulatory system is important to bring that blood to all of those cells. Let's go through the structures of the circulatory system. First, the central organ, the most important one, is the heart. And so here is a picture of a diagram of a heart. And remember that there are how many chambers in a human heart? We're mammals, right? So there are 4 chambers. You knew that, right? And the 4 chambers you can see on this diagram. There are 2 little ones toward the top, then 2 bigger ones toward the bottom. The top ones are called the atria. Singular of that is atrium. So there's a right atrium and a left atrium. And you just probably thought, she just said right, and that's on the left of the screen, and the left atrium is on the right of the screen. That's because you want to think about you're looking at someone's heart, and so if you were them, you'd be switched around, right? So the left atrium is on the person's left side, right atrium is on that person's right side. So when we look at that person, it's kind of opposite. So the atria are at the top, and the ventricles, there's the right ventricle and the left ventricle, those are at the bottom. And we'll talk more about what they each do in just a minute. I want to talk about a couple other structures first. And the other important structures besides the heart's the central organ, but then there's all these blood vessels that help carry the blood from the heart to all the places that it needs to be in the body. So remember we talked about a double loop circulatory system, and that means that blood goes to the from the heart to the lungs, from the lungs back to the heart, then from the heart out to the body, then back to the heart, then to the lungs, then back to the heart, then out to the body, then back to the heart. You get the picture, right? So it's a double loop. It's like a figure 8 almost. And so the blood vessels are named for whether they take the blood away from the heart or to the heart. So arteries take blood away from the heart, and I just remember that arteries start with A and away starts with A. So arteries take blood away from the heart. The important ones that we need to know the names of are the pulmonary artery. That's where blood comes out of the heart and goes to the lungs. So pulmonary is another word for lungs. So remember pulmonary artery, out of the heart to the lungs. And aorta is the biggest blood vessel of our bodies, and that's where blood comes out of the heart and goes to all the rest of the body. So if we look at our diagram, there's 2 places where blood's going to go from the heart and away from the heart, right? So these are the two big arteries. The aorta is going out to the rest of the body tissues. So that goes from the left ventricle out to the rest of the body tissues. The other place that blood goes out of the heart is out the right ventricle. So the 2 ventricles is where the blood's going to come out of the heart and go away from the heart. This right ventricle is going away out to the lungs through the pulmonary artery. So this we're going to put the whole story together in just a couple minutes, but remembering that the A blood vessels, arteries, aorta, those are going away from the heart. And as the blood vessels travel through the body, they get smaller and smaller. So from the heart, the aorta is huge, right? But as it travels, it starts branching. And the arteries branch into these things called arterioles, and those are just smaller vessels. So see how the artery is nice and big and thick, and the arteries are a little thinner. And then the arterioles are a little thinner. Arterioles then branch into capillaries that are really, really thin, and the reason they're really thin is so that they can diffuse oxygen out and carbon dioxide back in. So that's what happens at the tissues of the blood. And then it's the small vessels. Then it's the V vessels, that the veins and venules that are going to bring the blood back to the heart. So it goes capillaries, then into venules, our little veins, and then veins, and then coming back into the heart, that vena cava. And so veins bring blood back to the heart. The pulmonary vein is what returns blood from the lungs to the heart. So that's here it is, from the lung coming into the heart. Here, that would be the pulmonary vein coming in there. And then the vena cava is the vein that returns the blood from the rest of the body to the heart. And that is over here, and it comes in at two places. So there's an anterior and a posterior vena cava. So those are the big V blood vessels that we need to be familiar with, the pulmonary vein and the vena cava. And again, veins go to venules, and capillaries, that's how they get smaller. So the capillaries pick up the carbon dioxide from the tissues, the waste product, travel into venules, which are a little bit bigger, and then to veins that are even bigger, and then back to the heart. So let's look at how all that kind of works together, because that was a lot of information and it gets a little confusing looking at the diagram. But this one is nice because it has it all laid out together. So this is like a circuit, so you can really start wherever you want. But let's start at the lungs, because the lungs are where we pick up that precious oxygen, right? And in these diagrams, you'll see when there's blue blood, that means it doesn't have oxygen, and when it's red, it does have oxygen. So see in the lungs, the blood becomes red, so it's picking up oxygen. And we have two lungs, so it happens in two places. And both of the lungs then lead back to that left atrium. And the pulmonary vein is where the blood comes into that left atrium. Remember, veins are coming back into the heart. So the pulmonary vein comes into the left atrium, gets pumped to the left ventricle. Then the left ventricle pumps it out through the aorta, that biggest blood vessel in the body. And that branches and goes to all the different tissues of the body. So this is going like to the kidneys and the stomach, up to the brain. So that's all oxygenated blood going to all the tissues of the body that need it so that they can do cellular respiration and make energy. And those arteries branch until they get to capillaries. And once the capillaries are at specific tissues, oxygen is dropped off at the tissue, carbon dioxide picked up, and then the blood can travel back to the heart again from all these different places in the body. When the blood comes back to the heart, it enters the right side of the heart. The right atrium pumps into the right ventricle. And I remember that the right side of the heart goes right to the lungs. I just kind of say that saying, the right side goes right to the lungs, so that I remember that right is lungs. And whenever we're going away from the heart, that's an A word, right? So it's the pulmonary artery going away from the heart to the lungs. Pulmonary means lungs. And it branches to go to the two lungs. And there, the blood's going to drop off its carbon dioxide, pick up oxygen, and it's red again, and you start the whole process again. So this takes a little practice to get this whole kind of circulatory system process in your heads and to really understand it. So we're going to work a little bit in class on it, but hopefully you can some notes. And this is just going through all of these parts again. So we've talked about this. The right atrium pumps blood to the right ventricle. Right ventricle pumps blood right to the lungs. Pulmonary artery is the vessel that goes away from the heart to the lungs. A is away. And at the lungs, the blood picks up oxygen, leaves carbon dioxide. The pulmonary vein is the vessel that goes from the lungs back to the heart. The left atrium pumps blood into the left ventricle. The left ventricle pumps the blood out to all the tissues of the body, your brain, your kidneys, your stomach, all the great places. Then the aorta is the biggest blood vessel in the body, and that's the one that first goes away from the heart, and then it starts branching into the arteries, arterioles, capillaries. And at the capillaries, the oxygen and carbon dioxide are exchanged, and then the venules, veins, are what bring it back to the heart. And remember that the oxygen is used by the cells and all the tissues of your body to do cellular respiration, to make energy, to do all sorts of cool functions, like moving and jumping and yelling and thinking and taking tests and being really smart, right? Okay, so like I said, we'll get more practice on this tomorrow. Here is a picture that kind of shows it all together, where, remember, the blue is the not oxygenated blood, and the red is the oxygenated blood. So that left side of the heart is going to be oxygenated, the right side not oxygenated, and you see how in all the tissues the red is going to drop off the oxygen, and then once it drops off the oxygen, those capillaries kind of turn blue and go back to the heart to get pumped to the lungs to pick up more oxygen and be red again. So make sure, please, that you now are able to explain the purpose of the circulatory system, identify the main structures, and the functions of those structures. See you tomorrow.